Ah, finally in the right place. Hi, my name is Matti Tahvonen, and today I'm going to talk with my colleague Thomas Mattsson.
Hey.
About TouchKit and Vaadin TouchKit in real application, not just in some demo applications or UI mockups. So I think you all pretty much know what Vaadin is, and hopefully you will also know something about TouchKit. But basically TouchKit is a kind of an extension to core Vaadin. So you have lots of UI components, and I think even more essentially, I think you have lots of touch device related tools like APIs to control viewport settings.
Yes.
And then geolocation. Then you have access to local storage. And then there are some hooks that you can use to create some kind of offline modes. So if your connection to the Vaadin server is for some reason down, then you can still build some fallback application so that you can, for example, collect some data in places where I'm not sure if there are any places like that nowadays, especially in Finland. There is so good mobile.
Yeah, well, there is somewhere, and abroad especially, and mobile applications do suffer from this. So if you take your phone and your app out in the woods somewhere and you would still like to use it, then with an offline mode component, then that will still work.
Yeah. But more than about specific TouchKit features, we will be discussing how to connect these TouchKit features into real application and real databases and real stuff, real enterprise stuff. But before we get into actual business, we will have some ceremony here. We will be publishing the new version of Vaadin TouchKit. It's Vaadin TouchKit 4.0.0. Beta 1, I think. So it's the first beta release with a real Windows Phone support.
Yes.
And there is also, it somehow works with Firefox, but it's not officially supported yet. And then it will be supporting Vaadin 7.2. So 7.2 was released like 2 weeks ago, but now there is finally some real TouchKit version that works with 2.0.
Yes. And also we have a very nice new theme for TouchKit, which has been missing for a while now, but
yeah,
we finally got one that doesn't look like the old iOS version, so we're happy to release that as a beta now as well.
So there we have Vaadin TouchKit, and the new package has been already uploaded there and available now. Thank you.
So go out, try it. Hopefully you'll learn something about integration today as well.
Yeah, and today we are discussing about these enterprise solutions and architectures, and we have one demo project called Clean Beach that you have been working on. And in that version we will also be using this new 7.2 and new TouchKit release that was just done, but actually we have been doing with the snapshot release.
Yes.
Tell me something about this Clean Beach project.
It's actually a small mobile application that a non-profit here in Turku was interested in. They have this project where their organization is organizing the cleaning of all beaches and all beach-like locations in the coast of Finland, and it's a big Nordic project, but their part is mostly about Finland, and they wanted something to help them collect the data. So what has been collected, how much, where, when, and by whom. So they wanted a small, easy-to-use app where people can register themselves to events, they can bring their friends, and they can easily just click how much of what they've actually collected.
I have the application actually running here in the simulator, so we can actually look at how it works a bit.
Yeah. So very, very simple. There's not much or not many screens here, but you can see a login page immediately here.
There's also a Facebook login, but I still haven't registered to Facebook, so let's use just the...
Yeah, but basically you just register it, you need an email address and a password, and that's it. We don't really track anything else, but just so that we know who's been doing what. And when you've done that, you can see here the event page where it lists all events that you already have been registered in or you might be interested in. It also checks your local neighborhood, so it has geopositioning and checks where your mobile device is located and then lists events that are nearby if those would be interesting to you.
Okay, the simulator thinks we are in San Francisco, but
yes, we're not.
Actually, we are in Turku.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yes, so it lists all events that are happening nearby, basically.
Yeah, and then you can join to events and leave comments and
yes, so
report some trash.
Yeah, so report. I found a piece of glass or ceramic. I found some wood materials, so cardboard, plastic, stuff like this. And then you can also type if you found a fridge or something larger. There's a field for that as well. And everyone collects or writes in their own. Of course, you can write for your friend as well, but that statistic gets then collected. And then they have a nice statistics application on the admin side that we won't be really looking at because that's a normal Vaadin app.
So how do they get the data actually to the admin?
Both this mobile version and then the admin application are actually built into the same WAR file. So they're running inside the same servlet. They're just deployed on different addresses.
Yeah.
They all use the same database underneath and the same services.
So the application is running on Java EE server?
Yes, we're running on Wildfly 8 at the moment with a Postgres database backend. So a real enterprise application, even though this is a hobby project of sorts of mine, it is quite a big project. I counted about 7,000 lines of code, so functional lines of code. Quite a lot of stuff there. The architecture is pretty easy. We're using CDI, Java EE, so we have EGBs running underneath with a JPA integration running on Postgres.
So this is pretty much similar stuff that you are doing in your daily job normally?
Yes, it's exactly what I do.
Although it's a zero budget project, still the tools are real.
Yeah, exactly. I decided that, well, this is an important project and I wanted something that's easy to develop and something that I know already and something that I use daily. But I also wanted it to be testable. I want it to be maintainable because this is something that will be used years from now, hopefully. So I want something that anyone else can just pick up and take a look quickly. How is it done? I don't want any spaghetti code there. I want tests, actually.
Yeah, and that's pretty much. What do you think? What actually means this enterprise application?
Well, that's a very good question. Sometimes we joke around that something is too enterprisey, and that typically means a very heavy stack of a lot of services and stuff like this, many servers running. But to me personally, an enterprise application is something that you can actually maintain. It's something that's not spaghetti code. It's something that has tests, or at least the capability that you can add tests to it easily, and that you can bring in another developer and they can take a look at the code and understand the structure.
And pretty quickly start to actually do something useful there, not just break it something. And then they can have confidence to really make some changes because you have tests.
Exactly.
So
that's enterprisey. To me, of course, you can take this how many levels up as you want. But to me, the basis of an enterprise application is something that I can get paid for because the quality is good enough that it's actually maintainable, testable, and you can have someone else working on it as well.
Typically in Vaadin demo applications, there we only use servlet container and then just make the UI kind of mock-up there. And so it has a demo application, but that's not really kind of real application, pretty much never. So usually you will have some kind of more bigger toolset that you will be using there, like some kind of persistency and then maybe some inversion of control tools like CDI in Java EE.
Yes. Yeah, very, very typically, of course, our demos are only UIs because Vaadin is a UI framework. Vaadin itself doesn't really care what you're running underneath it. So we haven't really concentrated on that part in our demos at all because you can put whatever you want there.
And Vaadin is plain Java and TouchKit is plain Java, so it's pretty easy to plug into any kind of architecture that you have below there. But
definitely. But today we'll take a closer look at how we've implemented the Clean Beach project and show you a little bit.
So this is a kind of a standard Java EE application, but then Spring is also quite common
very
base
typical.
So
our customers are using Spring to integrate with.
It provides pretty much the same things actually nowadays that standard Java
It
EE
does, yeah.
6 or Java EE 7. So
Yeah, it does.
they both provide persistency and some kind of service layer.
Yeah, they both provide injection points. They both provide events. They're pretty much the same thing. For me, it's a question of what do you know already? Do you know Spring or do you know Java EE? Yeah. Based on that, you choose which one you want, and then when you picked one, then you stick with it because they don't really overlap in that sense, but they provide pretty much the same things.
Yeah, and these big kind of stacks are very good to start with because with those you will get a kind of a proven backend. So this works.
Yes.
This has been used in many situations. This has been used in clusters, and it has been
and it's very easy to find demos and tutorials and stuff like this on the internet.
Yeah, but there is also not just these tools, but also how you really actually use them. So in addition to have JPA for persistency and then Vaadin for UI and then some kind of service object, then there is still how you should kind of formulate your UI code also, and that's really the place that we are going to discuss. Yeah. So, shall we first get to this MVP? You always like to use MVP in pretty much all projects.
Yeah, it's a question I get asked a lot from clients. I work in the services department, so I have a lot of clients using Vaadin in different sort of situations, and I do classroom trainings as well. And we typically discuss MVP with most customers. It's not something that is by default mandatory in Vaadin by any means. Vaadin doesn't really force you to use any pattern at all, but the model view presenter pattern is something that we've found that when we're developing. We've been doing Vaadin apps for over 10 years now internally, so we pretty much know what works by now, and the MVP pattern is something that really does work with Vaadin.
And especially if you have application that has multiple screen and lots of developers and large business applications.
The MVP pattern is so flexible and so easy to use that you can start off with just a little simple version of it, and then if you need to, you can expand on that later on. But it's really easy to use, it's really easy to understand for new developers as well, so that's one of the reasons why we're using it.
But in those examples that I have seen, and in this also, you are always using CDI there in MVP. So you will be injecting services there into your presenters. Yeah,
it's very convenient. With the Vaadin CDI add-on, I can just create, or I can use the navigator, for instance, in normal Vaadin apps. We're not using it here in TouchKit, but you can use the navigator, for instance. You inject all your views, you inject presenters, and then you can inject whatever services you want into the presenters. Additionally, you can use CDI events between presenters, which I find really useful. Because it really decouples all of your views from each other. You can basically run unit tests on presenter code. You can run integration tests on presenter code. And all of that would work as you expect, even though you're basically testing UI code. We're going to show you a little bit about that later on.
There is one tricky part when you want to use Vaadin TouchKit and CDI. So usually our Vaadin TouchKit examples, they use own custom servlet. And then also our CDI examples, they use own custom servlet. So the trick is to kind of merge the functionality there and then start using Vaadin CDI injection chains in Vaadin TouchKit applications. So let's create an example how that is done. We can code it live because it's pretty easy task. So this is actually just Vaadin TouchKit project created by our Maven archetype, and this is the servlet class there. And there is a UI provider by default, which does some mobile selection. So if it's a mobile browser, then it chooses a different UI and then another UI for desktop. But we will be replacing that now with, is it CDI UI provider?
Yes.
So this is the UI provider that's in Vaadin CDI add-on. There is nowadays Alpha 2 version of it. Even though this says Alpha version, it actually says that this should be stable product. You have been using it in production for long and
for at least a year now. So
so it's pretty proven piece of software, and we will use that instead as a UI provider. So like that, and now we have the servlet there, and then we will need to change the UI class. So this is the UI class that was created by Vaadin Taskit archetype, but we will just need to annotate this now with
CDI UI.
CDI U. Yeah, this is the
CDI
one.
UI.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, the view is for the navigator.
Yeah, if you're using navigator, then you will be using UIs also. So now, without any parameters, this will be injected to just slash.
Yes, so the context root will be populated by this UI. If you want to, you can just easily add a string parameter there, and that will then become the deployment path.
And now we want to also ensure that this really works, so let's create a method that will do something like set content new label. It works. Is that good?
That should
and
work.
And then
yeah.
post construct. So now that this is a managed bean, we can call post construct, and then this method should override pretty much that, but we can also remove that altogether. We can just do everything in the post construct. Oh, okay, we can have an empty implementation there. Like that. And now debug that. Let's deploy it to Wildfly.
Of course, if you're using CDI, you're going to need a Java EE application server. You can't just run this on Tomcat or Jetty anymore.
No, I will need to also build the application.
But yeah, typically in production I use Wildfly 8 because it's good, it's proven. I've used JBoss since version 7.0 and the new 7 version is much better than any previous one. It's fast, it works, it's easy to configure, and I just like it. I use Tommy as well in some things, but I like the flexibility that JBoss gives me.
Yeah, but the JBoss and is someone else using Hibernate as a JPA provider? At least Tommy is using OpenJPA and the Glassfish is using Eclipse.
Yeah. They of course all of them have their default JPA providers, but you can override that if you want to. Typically you want to use the one that comes with the server, of course, because it's easiest that way.
Okay, I made a small mistake. I also removed my widget that I had been pre-compiled, but that should be done pretty soon. But well, we can skip ahead. This works, and okay, well, there it is.
Well, yeah, you can probably deploy it just so that we can tell people that we're not actually trying to lie to anyone. But yeah, as you can see, the code, we extend the normal UI class. It's just a servlet that needs to be changed, basically. We need a CDI UI provider because that's what scans the class path for the CDI UI annotation and actually make sure that our UIs become managed beans.
Well, it still doesn't work. Wow.
Demo effect.
Demo effect.
Well,
let's see. There. This one works. Okay. Now build and debug. One more try.
Third time's the charm, right?
Yeah, it still doesn't work.
Well, we're going to show you the Clean Beach application and the code for it in just a minute.
Okay.
And we'll add links to that as well, that it's available on GitHub, so you can take a look at that.
Maybe I'll also share these projects once I'm sure that it works. But actually, I think I tried it with Glassfish before, and now with Wildflower. So my favorite is Glassfish.
Yeah, well, we all have our preferences, of course. JBoss is very typically used in customer installations already, so that's why I use JBoss for most of my things. Glassfish is used by some of our customers, as is TomEE. Up to you really which one you want to use, but be aware they do have some slight differences in configuration when you create your project, so make sure you run it before you go on a live webinar.
Yes.
All right, let's
go to your IDE now and to this Clean Beach project, and let's see how you have implemented this MVP pattern there.
Yeah, so sorry about the small font here in the Package Explorer, but basically what I've done here is, yes, it's a hobby project, yes, there's not much functionality, but I still want a proper structure. I'm a little bit of a stickler that way. I want things to be organized in a particular way.
And you know that there will be also project for this Clean Beach next year, so you will be needing to do some updates next year, so you want to remember.
Yeah, and if someone else takes a look at this, then they'll know exactly where to find things. Yeah. So, as I said, I'm using JPA and EGB, so I have my entities here in my data package, so just a bunch of entities.
Can you show some of those entities?
Yeah, so let's see, for instance, I have an abstract entity that takes care of things like ID. So we have an auto-generated ID value here with the proper equals and hash code methods, of course. But then something real, such as for an event. Each event has a description, timestamp when it starts, the location where it's held, who's organizing it, comments, and joined users and so forth. Yeah. So
this is pretty basic if you have ever used JPA, or even if you have just used Hibernate or some older.
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty self-explanatory if you know JPA, but there's really not much special configuration here at all. I happen to be using Hibernate, but this should run as is on any JPA2 compatible product. There's really no custom things here at all.
Then you have some kind of services to access these.
Yeah, so the next package here is services. So for instance, authentication service here is a normal EGB. We're using a stateless EGB. I have a logging interceptor that just puts timestamps and stuff like this for testing. Then we inject the entity manager, just like a normal Java EE code. We have a logger, and then we have our bean methods. So here we have a login method, for instance, which is called from the login page. So we try to log in this user with an email and a password, and very typical JPQL query here.
Yeah, and now that this is kind of a standard AGB, you can also, in theory, if you need to have more scalability to your application, you can even move that service to some other server pretty easily by just configuring.
Yes. So the reason why I have everything in one project is because it's a little bit simpler to set up here, but there's no reason why this couldn't be in a separate project, deployed separately on another server. In this case, the amount of users is not that big, or at least concurrent users, so we don't need to do that. But since it's normal Java EE, you have all the flexibility.
If you're a big team, then definitely split this to own module.
Yes, definitely. But all right, then I have a couple of other small applications here. For instance, I have a standalone map application, which is embedded into the organization's homepage, which shows just a map with locations where are events being held right now. And then I have the statistics application as well. So these are both just normal Vaadin UIs, which are mapped to two different places. So this is a map UI and stats UI, very simple stuff. They're admin interfaces, or the stats is an admin interface, and then the map is just, it's a map. Yeah. So
just a different way to the same map, same data.
Yeah, so I'm using the same services and everything, CDI there as well. They're just mapped to a different address, and then I have different security for them, of course. All right, but the main project here, I like to use this .ui package name here because I know everything in there is Vaadin code, and that's my UI code, so it starts here. I also have a separate package for components. Here we have stuff like confirm popover, which is something that is very typically used in many places.
So this this is Vaadin components or
exactly.
compositions, actually.
Custom components in most cases. So it's something that I know that I'm going to be using from many different views. I like to separate them out. So there's some stepper component here, for instance. This is a custom field that deals with integers, so that you can plus one,
custom
plus
field,
one,
which is done for this process only,
Yes.
so it's not separated to kind of add-on.
No, and it's not something that I'm going to publish either into the directory. So it's here, just in the components package. If you want to publish your component, then it makes sense to put that component in a separate project.
And I bet if you would be using this stepper component in 3 different processes, then you would probably create an add-on.
I would really quickly create an add-on for that.
Then just add kind of a dependency to all those projects, and then you can
exactly.
maintain the stepper component separately.
Yes, definitely. Then we have GWT stuff, so basically the widget set file here, which just says that we're using TouchKit. Well, we can take a look at that.
That's pretty much,
it's pretty much use TouchKit, and then we're using the maps with leaflets. So
and this is automatically maintained by Vaadin tools. So
I'm not touching this at all. This gets automatically updated by the toolset. But then, maybe a little bit more interesting. So how do I actually structure things? We talked about MVP a little bit beforehand, but the way I like to do things is I like to have superclasses for everything, or super interfaces in the case where that's needed. So in this quite simple project, I have an abstract presenter, I have an abstract view, and then I have an iView, so interface for the views. And all presenters and all views extend these classes. We're not going to talk about how MVP actually works here. There's a lot of nice resources on the web. But in this case, I'm basically dropping the model class completely because I don't really need it. I'm just using a very simple presenter view pattern. So the presenter here...
So basically your model is there.
The model is the entities themselves. And I just pass them along in method calls. So basically the presenter knows about the view, but it knows the view through its interface and not the actual implementation. And that's just a normal Java class. So nothing Vaadin specific here. I have a rule, no Vaadin imports in the presenters whatsoever. The view class is in this case, it's a navigation manager. That's one of the components that TouchKit provides us. It's similar to the navigator in the normal desktop version. So it manages navigation from one page to another. It gives you nice transition effects.
Yeah, it does some kind of client-side magic. Like to play down the client-server latency and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. In normal desktop apps, this would be a custom component. And that, of course, implements the iView interface. And then we have a reference to the presenter here. So the view knows about the presenter and vice versa. And iView here is a very simple interface. I need some things from the view, for instance, the user, and then I have some very small things like show error notification, stuff that I know I'm going to need in many views. So I just add them here into the default implementation so that I have them anywhere I need. So that's the base classes. Then I typically separate each view into its own package. So you might see here that I have UI.views. Whatever view we're happening to work on. So for instance, the login view here.
It's probably the most simplest one. So let's go through that one.
So let's start with the interface. So I log in here. What's the thing I'm going to need from the login page? What's the presenter going to need? So we're going to need a logging error. Of course, I had the other error messages already, but those are generic. I wanted this specific thing because it shows a specific message in a specific place, so I need this. Then I need a method to show the register layout because I want people to be able to register, and that's something the view does. So when I call this, the view changes from the login to register. Registers success or not. And then this registration error as well. So that's pretty much it. That's all the methods that I need from the login presenters to be able to control what actually is visible at any time in my view.
And then this login view that practically contains your Vaadin components layouted somehow.
So the login view here extends the abstract view, of course. So it is now a navigation manager and implements this iLogin interface. And in here I have lots of Vaadin things. So if we open up the import, there's some inject things, yeah, sure, but mostly we have Vaadin things. So login button here, the Facebook integration that we're working on in this project is of course imported here because we need that, and other things. So you can see the email field here.
Which is pretty much text field, but it kind of changes the keyboard.
Yeah, exactly. You get better, you get to the much more easily, and it has a .com as well button typically. Value change events, and then a lot of components. So we have buttons, horizontal layout, image label, normal Vaadin stuff pretty much. So the view class contains all Vaadin code, and as you can see, we even use the properties here, so the data model. As I said, I have a rule about no Vaadin imports in the presenter because that makes it unit testable, and I'm going to show you that in just a few moments.
Yeah, let's quickly look at the presenter and then go to check out those tests.
Yes, so the presenter here is UI scoped. The view here is UI scoped as well. So that's one of the scopes that we provide in the CDI.
So this means that you will have this object injected to each browser window.
Each browser tab, yes. Login presenter is the same thing, as I said, and you can see here I inject the authentication service, for instance, in this presenter because I need to be able to call the login method. I'm also using CDI events here, so if the login is successful, we get a user object from the service, then we fire a login event, and that basically means that, okay, the login page is now done with whatever it was doing, and then some other view takes over from there.
Some other view reacts and then switches itself to the...
Yeah, in this case, it's the actual UI class that does it, but it's typically a main layout or something, because we need to change the whole content of the application. But yeah, it's a very nice way of decoupling your code. So the login page doesn't know what happens after a successful login, as it really shouldn't, in my opinion. And then we have methods here that we call from the view class. So when we click on the button in the view that says login, I can show you how it looks here. So this is the login button, and the only thing I have here is we call presenter.login, and that's it. So no business code whatsoever. We delegate all of that to the presenter, and then the presenter actually calls the authentication service and decides what to do if things fail. Yeah. So either we fire the event or we show an error.
Yeah. So this already makes kind of sense that you know where the code is that you want to modify. If there is a bug, you immediately know where to go to fix it. And even if you have some helper dude coming along with you in the project, then he can do it himself or herself.
Yeah, the rules are very simple. If it contains logic such as an if clause even, then it's the presenter. If it contains Vaadin components of any kind, then it's the view.
Yeah. Okay.
Couldn't be more simple than that.
But the main thing actually with MVP is that you can test some of the UI logic that you have, some of that code there.
So our login method here, for instance, that we have takes a string, and then it calls the authentication service and so forth. But since we don't really have any Vaadin imports here, we can actually run a unit test against this. Of course, an authentication service like this needs to be accessed somehow, otherwise we get a null pointer exception if we just try to do that. But Mockito is a very good tool that I typically use in these sorts of situations. So we can mock everything else except for this presenter class. So I have a unit test for this particular method here, login presenter test, just a normal JUnit test with Mockito, nothing else in here. So we have a login presenter, then authentication service. The presenter is real, of course, because that's what we're going to test on. But the authentication service is a mock with Mockito. It doesn't contain anything. We can just check, has it been called or not? The event, same thing. We need to fake that because that's not what we want to test. We would just want to record what happened to it. And same thing with the login view. Of course.
So that's the interface.
Yeah. So the yes, this is actually wrong. This should be login. Yeah, of course. But this is basically what we're testing against. So no Vaadin imports here again, which makes it easier for us to run the test. So
there is still
my API is wrong, or API is wrong. I'm gonna fix that. Just in a minute. But yeah, quick look on the init. We create our presenter, we mock our view, and then we mock our service, just so that we can follow up the calls. And then we say to the authentication service, when this login method is called, then you should actually return. So then return new user. So we don't return null. Yeah. It actually returns something useful. Yeah. Just the new user is what we need in this particular case. And then the event, the login event, is something that Mockito can't actually mock. So I've created this new fake event class here, which is just an implementation of the CDI event interface. Yeah. The only thing I do here is the same thing that Mockito would do. I record whatever was the parameter that the fire method was called with.
Yeah.
And then I have two tests. So login with null. So if we log in with null and null, we should make sure that we're calling the authentication service with null and null, and make sure that the login error was called, because we don't have that sort of a user here. And then we make sure that the event was not sent. So the login event was not sent. Yeah. And then log in with correct credentials. If that happens, then we make sure that the authentication service call again happened, and then we make sure that the login error was not showed, but the event was sent instead.
Okay. Can you show me that those really work?
Let's see. So just right-click, run as JUnit test.
Next.
Yep. And as you can see here, we have a green board. So both of these ran, and both of them were
no demo effect this time.
No. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah. So very simple and really a unit test for your presenters.
Yeah.
So you can decouple this from everything else. Just mock out the view, mock out any services that you have, and you can actually unit test your UI logic.
Yeah. So if you make a bug in your UI logic, then you will catch it with this one. But if you have a bug in your integration to database, then this doesn't work.
Yeah, then this doesn't really work anymore, because then that's the combination of a presenter and the service itself. So of course we're going to need something else for that.
Yeah.
Luckily, there is such a thing. In this particular case, we're using Arquillion because that's a very useful tool for testing CDI and Java EE stuff. There's a little bit of more setup involved because of how Arquillion works. You actually need a server to run it because you need the Java EE runtime environment.
Yeah, or kind of a fake server.
Yeah, it's a
but it has all the same services that real servers has.
It does.
API.
Yeah, exactly. So it basically fakes the whole environment for you. It provides injections. It provides all the services that a real server would have, and then you can run your tests against that. So the unit test is very simple. It's just for the one particular thing. Yeah. But if we want to test more, from basically the server presenter downward, all the way as far as we want, then Arquillion is a very good tool, because we can do a very similar test that we did now. We create a new presenter and we call login on it.
Yeah.
But in this case, we want to have an integration test. So we want to go all the way down to the database and fetch whatever we have there, and then get it back and see if we actually got the correct thing back.
Yeah.
So a much more heavyweight test, but a very, very useful test to have. So it's basically what we're doing here is we're creating a full integration test that has everything but the actual UI in it. Yeah. And with MVP, that's really easy to use. So let's take a look at how that actually
works.
Yeah, how that's done. So run with Arquillion class. If you're not familiar with Arquillion, don't worry. As I said, all of this code will be provided in the link after the webinar, so you can take a look. And there's lots of great tutorials on Arquillion.
So this is basically this Arquillion stuff. It doesn't that much depend on Vaadin.
No, not at all,
except that this presenter, which we are testing here, with the backend, with the services, That's built for Vaadin application.
Yeah, exactly. So the only reason we're using Archillion is that I happen to be using CDI and Java EE in my architecture.
Yeah.
So what we want to do here is test the presenter. In this case, I won't be using Mockito to mock things because I don't really need to do that. I want to use everything that's underneath the presenter. I want to use my real backend. What I need to do is create a dummy view because that's still Vaadin code. I don't want to have that in here, so I've created an extended class here with a setter for my dummy view, and as you can see, it takes an ilogin here.
Yeah.
And that takes actually the dummy view class here. So I have a dummy login that does pretty much the same thing as the event class did previously. It just follows here that, okay, the login error method has been called.
Yeah.
And that's everything I need in this particular test. Of course, you can put whatever else you want here. But other than that, it's pretty much the same as we did. So there's a lot of Archillion stuff here. We need to create the deployment with shrink wrap. Typical Archillion stuff, you add the classes that your test is going to run on. So I'm going to need the authentication service, the interceptor. I'm going to need my dummy login class, the interfaces, and the super classes for those as well. And I'm going to also need my logger because my services uses the logger, and the JDBC driver actually, which is H2 in these tests.
Yeah. And then persistency.
Yep. So persistency configuration, I need that of course because I want to use a real database, and then I need an empty beans.xml for the server to actually activate CDI. Yeah. So that creates basically a runnable Java archive here, and that gets deployed to the server then, and then Archillion runs tests against that. But the actual test code, here we don't create a presenter manually, we inject it because we want to use CDI in this test, and we know that the presenter is going to be injected like this in the real world, so we're going to inject it. I don't inject the login presenter, I want to use my dummy class, so that's why it's here, but this one of course extends my login presenter.
Yeah.
Then the authentication service, this is to create test data. When I start up this service, the database is empty, so I need to add a dummy user just to make sure that everything works and I can actually get
we actually saw that
login.
when I showed that locally deployed service.
And then I have this dummy login page that just records what happened to it. So before the test runs, we create the dummy login, we set it to the presenter. This has already been injected here. We create a new user with the name test, an email and a password here, and we call the authentication service to actually store this in the database so that we have a test user.
Yeah.
And then we have the same two test methods that we had previously, so login with null and login with the correct username and password. So null and null, what happens here is that if this is successful, then the login error will not be shown, but if it fails here, or if this login is successful, then we won't get an error. If it's not successful, then we will get an error, and I can assert that on my dummy view that yes, this login error was actually shown because that method was called. And same thing here, we log in with the correct things, then I can make sure that okay, the login message was not shown.
Yeah.
And of course, I could, if my mock view had more code in it, I can actually check more things as well. But pretty much the same idea here. Test one that takes null and one that takes the correct credentials, and make sure that those work. And this now uses, basically it's the same code that we call from the view. So it uses the complete backend all the way down to a database.
Yeah. So now executing this will take a bit more time.
Yeah, so we can run this as a normal unit test again, but this will take a little bit of more time. Maybe you'll see here that JBoss is actually running in the background. So Archillion starts a JBoss instance to itself.
Instance. Yeah, it's not really the web server, but the services.
No. Yeah, everything that's in there. And as you can see, there's a lot of things happening here. But you can see the output: starting test created user, starting test created user. That's my before code running here, and the scoreboard is green. So Archillion tests dot login presenter test both ran and both passed. They took quite a while longer to pass, but it still worked. So with this, I can be confident that the whole chain works. My backend actually works with a real database. This uses H2 underneath, as I said, but I could just as well configure Postgres.
Yeah. Only thing that concerns me here is that if somebody made just a new release, like we did in this webinar,
Yes.
maybe if there is a bug and then you have using that version, how you can ensure that the whole stack really works also in the browser?
That's a very good question. Of course, this test here, our Kilian test, doesn't really take into account what happens if a user actually clicks a button and the button itself does the wrong thing.
Yeah.
What happens then? We have a null pointer exception in a text field.
Yeah, in the client side.
Yeah. what happens?
Or in the server side.
Yeah, exactly. We can't catch that with an Kilian test, so we need something more.
Yeah. And that's an example that I have been preparing. So we are using TestBench.
Yeah.
TestBench is a Vaadin kind of integration test tool or automated acceptance test tool or whatever you want to call it, but it commands browsers.
Yeah.
And it's really using a real browser to do real things, and it kind of fakes that user clicks there and then just things happen. The real browser sends some events to the server, and then the server responds and something happens in the browser, and then we can verify that something really is present there in the page.
So basically you can, for instance, you can record a specific sequence of events. For instance, our login event. You can record in the browser that, okay, start up this page, type in this as a username, this as a password, and click the login button. We've done that programmatically here because with the newest release, it's easier to do that that way.
And I have always thought that the writing is better even here in the UI level, because it's not that hard to write those tests.
Definitely not.
And then you will end up with something more maintainable tests. So in case your specification changes, then you can pretty easily just modify those UI tests also.
Yeah.
So
but the UI tests, of course, if your UI is constantly changing, then you probably shouldn't be creating tests for each separate version. It's more of an acceptance test phase thing, and then regression testing especially. So we're running.
But this is also very good integration test, because this also tests the UI library part and the web server and browser. If your browser updates and then you run your test with the new browser, and then there is some kind of bug because of the new browser version.
Yeah, there might be a CSS bug, for instance, or JavaScript bug.
This setup will also catch those errors.
Exactly. So very, very useful. We run tens of thousands of these tests internally as well for the Vaadin library.
Yeah.
And then many of our customer projects use this, of course, as well, just for regression testing, because in big projects you can't really afford not to do them, and TestBench is a really easy way to do it with Vaadin.
And TestBench, it's based on Selenium, or actually the newer version of Selenium WebDriver, and you can use any browser there. So you can use the iOS simulator that I just showed beforehand, this one. You can command this one, and actually also real devices. You can kind of install a fake browser into your mobile device, and it will act as a browser for the. Yeah.
So you can proxy things to your real device. You can run it on
an
actual tablet.
You can create kind of clusters for the test nodes, so that you can have Windows Phone device, Windows device, Mac device.
Yeah. And I don't know how many servers we have running, but it's a lot.
All browsers
all browsers and operating system combinations that we support. We have servers for them in a cluster here.
I'm using here just Chrome driver. Chrome driver is quite good actually to test mobile application, because most mobile browsers are based on WebKit. And it's pretty much the same thing as Chrome, even still. And if it works here, it's a very good starting point at least. So, and more essentially, you can now see here what happens. So in the setup phase, I will just prepare this driver, which is kind of our Java API to the browser, and then do some setups, like set the screen size to something that's more relevant for mobile devices, And then I have refactored the test so that you can actually read what it says and follow the code. And this is called page object pattern. So it's very good to separate stuff like if we go to the login page object and it's login with method. So here is actually the real stuff that we are doing. We are using the driver and there is an API to find an element. So we can select an element from the UI, and in this case we will be using XPath query to select the first email field on the page and fill in there the email there that we call from the actual test. So this is just to create the tests also so that they are also maintainable. So if you have that new developer, he knows where actually the error happens.
Yeah, and most of the tests, if you have a login page, actually have to do a login first into your application to be able to run. So if you have a separate object and separate test for that, it's really easy to fix if something goes wrong.
Yeah. So for this project, because this was a kind of voluntary project, we didn't have that much money in this first phase to make some tests, but of course next year when we will be making more enhancements to application, before that we actually need to make also tests.
Yes, definitely.
And this is just built for the example, but also this login page, we can now recycle this part in many of those test cases, because we want to, this is testing commenting on an event, but we will of course want to test creating an event, joining to groups or something else.
Yeah.
So in all of those we will be always using this login page also. So I hit the breakpoint there and then execute this test. I have now already deployed the application, or it was actually deployed before the webinar, to the Wi-Fi, so it's running there, so you can just launch it directly from the IDE. So now some magic starts to happen, and I added the breakpoint because you wouldn't see pretty much anything without it. Now it hit to the breakpoint, and if we look, we have here this Chrome. So this is now the Chrome instance that is controlled by Vaadin test bench. And it has already executed the login there, and then it has joined this event, and it's about to do comment there. So let's step here. So fill in comment and then verify it's present, and then it also does some other things that I just copy pasted from a different example project. So with test bench you can also do some Vaadin specific things in addition to just the normal Selenium stuff. So you can, for example, get the time that was used by the server to serve this specific user for this specific action. So you can actually also verify that if you make some kind of broken SQL query or something, that okay, you still have a software that actually scales.
Yeah.
So 3 different kind of tests.
Yeah, so if you want just unit tests, those are very easy to do. Just use Mockito to mock whatever you want. That's not part of the class that you're testing. If you need more heavyweight tests, integration tests, you can test basically anything that's underneath that UI component level. So presenter downward all the way to our database with Archillion.
And then if you really want to test everything, then you want to throw in also Vaadin test bench.
Yeah, because you do want to test the UI. You want to make sure that your UI actually works, because of course that's what your user is going to be using. So you want that.
Those basic unit tests, those are the fastest ones. So you want lots of those. Then you want some of these integration tests with Archillion maybe, and then you will also want some of those test bench tests to really be sure that all functionalities are still there.
Definitely.
I think testing is quite a good thing to kind of...
Yeah, it's definitely a part of the enterprise world. And it's something that I do want in this project, even though it's just a hobby project, it is important to have. And the structure here, a normal MVP pattern, CDI, EGBs, it's very well suited to this type of testing as well.
Some serious testing is very essential if you want to really maintain your application.
Definitely,
You might get the first version out with pretty good results without test, but I wouldn't be such confident with the next version.
When you start refactoring, adding features, removing something, then you definitely
you will have
need
lot more confidence to actually do those refactorings and not just be scared. I cannot do this.
Okay. Refactoring without testing is just changing things. So you don't know if you actually broke something if you don't have tests to prove it.
As usual, we have run out of our time, so we'll need to get to the questions and answers. We will just take a couple of questions and then quit this webinar. But if you have some related questions, you can still fill them into the forum page that you are probably using to watch this webinar. And we'll try to be a bit more active today evening, tomorrow, early next week to answer those questions and some of the questions that weren't answered here in this actual webinar. And then, before I forget it, I will also want to remind that those who actually signed into this webinar, you will have some kind of present from us coming with email later today or tomorrow. You will have a discount code for Vaadin TouchKit. I don't remember how much they give you this time, but there is some sort of small discount for those who actually pre-registered to the webinar. Okay, let's have a couple of these questions. Solomon is asking about client-side usage of these Vaadin TouchKit components. So basically, Vaadin components, they usually have kind of a dual nature. They have the client-side implementation and then the actual server-side implementation that's most commonly used, for example, in all these cases. But if you are, for example, making this offline mode, then you will want to use some of those TouchKit components offline. And Solomon is asking how to navigate between navigation views and in Navigation Manager in an offline mode application or poor client-side application.
Well, typically, of course, and you can take a look at this in the Clean Beach app as well, you use the server-side API to actually navigate. So you call navigate to some specific view. But if you're offline, then you don't have access to that API, of course. So what you need to do is use the V Navigation View and V Navigation Manager classes.
We have used this V prefix for the client-side implementation.
It's very simple to know which one is client-side and which one is server-side that way. But to answer your question, the actual code that does the navigation is actually in the connector class. So Navigation Manager connector is the place where you want to look.
There you can see kind of an example code that this is how you use it.
Exactly.
But you can use similar calls from your own.
So you put the same type of code in your own application, and you can just use V Navigation View and Manager through that API. So basically what you do is you call set next view and then you call navigate forward.
Then you will get the smooth
navigation and navigate back to get it the other way. So take a look at the API there. I think that'll answer any questions you have about that.
Felix is asking about using Qt themes in Vaadin. Vaadin TouchKit uses by default Qt theme, so it's not using the standard Vaadin theming that we use for desktop application, and it does this to actually make smaller amount of requests to the server. So it's packaging all the CSS and even small images, even raster images, into this JavaScript bundle that Qt creates. And this is very good for performance reasons. And if you really want to make very optimized Vaadin TouchKit application, then your theming also should be in that kind of package. That makes it a bit more difficult to theme it, because each time you make a change, you will either need to have a kind of a Qt development mode open, and it will compile the new theme for you on the fly, or then you will have to recompile the widgets on the fly. Luckily, recompilation is now much faster with Vaadin 7.2. There is only one permutation that gets compiled, and also Qt has done some optimizations again, so the Qt compilation time is much more smoother, but you always like to prefer your developer speed and not
Yeah,
the speed
I kind of cheated in the Clean Beach project because I'm actually using a normal Vaadin theme on top of the TouchKit theme.
Yeah.
The TouchKit servlet makes sure that we load the TouchKit theme that goes through GWT, and you can take a look at how that works in the code. But in addition, I have a normal Vaadin theme in normal CSS files that just gets loaded on top of the TouchKit theme.
Then you have the Quit theme there, and then add just some small tweaks with normal, just plain extra CSS.
Yeah, exactly. So I know I'm going to need a bigger caption, I'm going to need a bolded text and something like that. So I just add that as normal CSS.
But I think this is
I find it a little bit easier.
Very relevant question. So
it is, definitely.
Maybe I could promise that I will make an example.
Yeah.
Maybe a different branch to the Clean Beach project where we will package these CSS files with the quit mechanism, and then you can really limit the amount of requests.
And then you can take a look at a real example on how to do those types of things.
There is also in some of our mobile demos, I think some of those at least is using quit theming. Okay, we have passed 1 hour, so we will be stopping right now. But there are still lots of questions, and we'll look at those later.
Yeah, we'll answer them on the forum later on.
Thank you. Thank you, Thomas. It was great to have you here.
Yeah,
some real experience from using TouchKit, not just some dude who has done it or speaking about it.
My pleasure.
Bye.